Caroline Smith. This is Caroline Smith-Mclean. She's a hypnotherapist and mindset coach. She's also the co-founder of Golden House, which is an amazing wellness centre in Shippen Sudbury, just on the outskirts of Bristol. And I've invited Caroline to talk about the kind of how hypnotherapy can really help us to navigate anxiety. Anxiety can be really debilitating and can affect anyone at any point in their life. And unfortunately for some people throughout their whole life, when it's not kind of dealt with the kind of root cause as to why. And the NHS and NICE guidelines, which is our National Institute of Clinical Excellence, are kind of increasingly recommending pharmacological ways to treat things like chronic pain, IBS, and anxiety and depression, because there is increasing acknowledgement of the mind-body connection and the development of these conditions. So without further ado, Caroline, can you just provide a brief explanation of what hypnotherapy is and how it works?
Yeah, so actually what I do during my hypnotherapy sessions is not like a lot of people think of when they see on TV where, you know, you click your fingers or you wave a watch above somebody's head. It's not like that at all. So during our sessions, I do a combination of things, working with both the conscious part of the brain, so this part of the brain, the kind of logical part of the brain, and then this part of the brain, which is the unconscious part of the brain, where we have our amygdala, which is known as the fight or flight, the hippocampus, which is where we store all of our emotions, behaviors, memories, things like that. And then the hypothalamus, which regulates the chemical releases in our body and brain. So what I do is I want both the conscious and the unconscious part of the brain to be working together, to be in harmony, if you like. So during my sessions, I actually get people very much focusing on how they want things to be, rather than all the problems that have been going on. I want them to start focusing on what life would look like if things were better, because our brain basically gives us more and more and more of what we focus on. So when we start focusing on what's going well, what's been good, and, you know, how we'd like things to be, our brain very much takes that direction and starts moving towards it. So we do that all using the conscious part of the brain. And then I take people into a hypnotherapy session, which is basically like a really deep relaxation.
Yeah.
And during a hypnotherapy session, it simulates REM sleep to a degree. And what happens is when we have our REM sleep at night, it helps us to move things from this part of the brain, where it's kind of emotional, and then into this part of the brain where it's more of a narrative memory, a memory that we've got much more control over. So to a degree, hypnotherapy kind of simulates the REM sleep, helps us empty our stress bucket. And also what we can do during hypnotherapy is, because our conscious mind is not ever closed off as such, but it's slowed down, it's relaxed. So we're not so ready to say, well, that's not true, that's not true. I can start to kind of put in positive affirmations and positive beliefs that people want in their life, rather than the ones which are like, well, everything's going to go wrong, this has happened and this has happened. Actually start to put more positive beliefs in.
Yeah, I suppose that's where like a good night's sleep, or like sleep on it, you know, if something's really like wound you up, and actually sleeping on it the next day, it never feels as bad as in the moment, doesn't it? So yeah, definitely, you know, thinking about that REM sleep, and that state that we go in, and, you know, that emotional initial part where we're really emotional about it, actually sleeping allows us to kind of take that away, and like you say, get into that kind of more conscious part of our brain, to figure it out. And is that sort of what you mean in terms of how people can relate to that, if that makes sense, in everyday life?
Yeah, and so part of what I do in our sessions as well is I do also teach people how anxiety is created. So if you think about it this way, most anxiety is not actually because there's a threat happening right now. It's because we have a perceived threat. So for example, if you were to leave your house right now and you were to go outside and there was a polar bear, yes, you'd have a panic attack. You move from this part of the brain to this part of the brain, you'd be off like a shot, in which case you'd actually be really pleased. But also you might be having that exact same response when you get an email at 10 o'clock at night saying, Emily, you haven't sent my recording through, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We get that same level of perceived threat. And it's the same when people are constantly thinking, well, things are going to go wrong, or I don't know, like with exams, well, how am I going to get through my exam? Or during COVID, you know, people were in this expectation that life was kind of falling apart. And we know that these things are due to the way that we think about them, not the actual circumstances. Otherwise, every single person on earth would have been having those thoughts or those beliefs during that time and having panic attacks, but they weren't.
Yeah. And are there kind of like common triggers that you see in what can cause like that heightened anxiety?
Not really as such. So if you imagine you've got a little stress bucket in your brain, okay? And what happens is over time, through difficult circumstances, but mainly through our negative forecasting, so thinking that something's going to go wrong, something's going to go bad, then we fill up that stress bucket, okay? And that stress bucket just gradually gets fuller and fuller and fuller. And when it gets to the point of being full and overflowing, then the amygdala is triggered and that primitive part of the brain takes over. And what happens then is that primitive part of the brain, it tries to keep us safe. And the way it thinks is keep us safe is by thinking negatively. So then that goes in the stress bucket. So then the stress buckets fill up. So we're working from this part of the brain. We're working from this part of the brain. So it's going in the stress bucket. And it's a vicious cycle. So that hypnotherapy session or REM sleep empties that stress bucket so that we're working more from this part of the brain than the emotional part of the brain.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I always call it like with my son, the monkey brain.
Yeah.
So if your monkey brain's activated and it's like, you know, you can't then access the kind of top part of the tree. So it's like hanging off the bottom, and the top part of the tree is kind of, you know, where you've got all your rational thoughts, you know, where you can actually sort of calm yourself down, but you can't access that until your monkey is calm. And yeah, so then he's like, oh, okay, I want to be able to rationally think, you know, or problem solve, you know, being able to problem solve. We can't access any of that if we're, you know, but like you say, from a stress perspective or from a protection perspective, that part of our brain is developed so early on that it's there to protect us, and that's, you know, for us to live is its main focus, isn't it? So so that kind of nicely leads us into kind of how does hypnotherapy sort of differ from traditional forms of like anxiety treatment, such as like counselling, and I suppose medication, really?
Yeah. So a lot of people come to me when they've had some people have had counselling, and you know, counselling can be really, really great to work out what's happened, why it's happened, and all of those things if people feel like they have the need to talk. However, for example, with me, when I had my mental breakdown, I tried traditional therapies, and actually I didn't know why I was having a mental breakdown. I didn't know what was causing me anxiety. I didn't know what was causing me depression. I just knew that that's how I felt. So trying to unpick and talk about all of those things actually felt really difficult for me. And I couldn't actually come up with, my brain almost felt like it was made of lead. Like I couldn't come up with answers or, you know, talk about those things. Whereas with hypnotherapy, we were actually much more focused on how I wanted things to be, which felt lighter and freer. And then we went through a process of emptying that stress bucket. So all of those things that you would talk about in counselling, they're all in that stress bucket. And we can either choose, for some people, they like to talk about it, they like to unpick things. And for other people, they don't want to unpick all those things. But with hypnotherapy, we start to empty that stress bucket out either way without the need to go into things. With some things, like, for example, more traumatic things, there are slightly different ways of doing things so that we might actually rewind particular memories that are triggering people. But other than that, it's very much a case of I use the same technique with everybody to empty that stress bucket, to get rid of the more negative thinking, which it is habit. You know, I used to think actually before I had my mental breakdown, I was a real worrier, like a real worrier. And I used to just think that that was the way I was. Whereas now I'm not a worrier at all. So it's the habits that I've formed. And I quite often say to people, it's a bit like with neural pathways. If you imagine you've got, I don't know, a local field near you, if you walk the same path across that field every single day, then the grass stops growing, doesn't it? And then if you
Yeah.
don't walk down that path for, I don't know, 6 months or whatever, then the grass grows back and you could create a new path if you wanted.
Yeah.
And that's how neural pathways work. You know, we start kind of choosing more what we're focusing on consciously. And
Yeah.
then during the hypnotherapy, emptying that stress bucket and changing things at an unconscious level so that it just
Yeah.
feels much easier and more natural.
Yeah, and I often say to my clients as well, and I use that similar analogy as well, is like sometimes we accidentally take the easier option, which is that well-trodden, that historic well-trodden path. But often you get down that path and it's quite hard to get through. And you
Yeah.
remember what the new path looks like. It's got a nicer view, it feels nicer. So then you almost like have to go, oh, actually, just going to check in with myself and I'm just going to cut back over to that other path that I've trodden on. So it's not like you have to be perfect every time, but sometimes when you do go into those old habits, it's just having that acknowledgement that you are doing that again, and that path is still going to be easier. It's not an all or nothing, oh, I've messed up now, so I'm just going to
Oh,
go back to the
absolutely.
was.
Yeah.
You can definitely just switch back to the other path. And like I say, it does get easier. And I used to be like that. I was quite negative thinker. And the more I've become a bit more solution focused, and
Yeah.
I suppose that's what you're kind of thinking of, or you're describing, is you just feel more like a lot kinder to yourself, and then that then doesn't increase your stress load over the day because you're not speaking badly about yourself, or like you say, which adds to that bucket every day.
Absolutely. And your brain will also always be giving you evidence as well of what you believe about yourself. So if you're
Yeah,
constantly telling yourself, oh, I'm so stupid, you'll find evidence that you're stupid. It's not that you actually are stupid, but it's like
yeah,
an algorithm that you're training your brain with. And it's quite, I say to people, say for example, this person thinks that everybody in Bristol's really rude, disrespectful. They'll go into a cafe and they'll notice all the people that are rude and disrespectful. This
yeah,
person is saying, oh, I love Bristol, people are really kind, friendly. They'll go into the cafe and they will literally notice the complete opposite. It's not, they're in the same cafe but
yeah,
their brain is
yeah,
noticing different things.
yeah. That's so true. It's very true. Um, And I suppose that then kind of leads us nicely on into how, how does hypnotherapy kind of deal with the root cause of our anxiety rather than just like managing the symptoms, which often like medication would
Yeah.
do. Uh, yeah, so if you just want to go into that a little bit
Yeah.
more.
So, as I say, some of what I do is teaching people how anxiety is actually created because what I want is long lasting results. I don't want to work with somebody for our sessions. They go away and come back to me a year down the line because, this is the thing. This is how we know that it's not always the circumstances that are causing these problems because otherwise all of my customers would go away, life would continue happening, and they'd come back to me and say, right, it didn't work. But
Yeah,
because we've changed their mindset and we've made that a habit and now much more of a natural way of living, they're
yeah,
able to deal with the circumstances so much better. So like I say, that stress bucket, everything that's happened in our life has gone in that stress bucket. And so
yeah,
each session we're just pulling little things out. So sometimes, you know, I always say to people in terms of how many sessions, it's usually between 6 and 12 for lifelong changes. And
mm,
some people they'll feel better after their very first session. Some people were like 3, 4 sessions in and we're talking about what's causing anxiety and they're like, oh yeah, I'm still doing that. Because
yeah,
it's a learning process.
yeah,
So, I always say to people, you can't come to my session for an hour a week and then go away and carry on doing everything that you were doing that brought you here in the first place. So a lot of it is teaching them what not to do, which is to not be allowing yourself to catastrophize every single situation. And like I say, our brain literally will give us more of what we focus on. So if we are constantly focused on what was wrong, what went bad, we are just going to keep seeing more and more and more of those circumstances and situations in our life.
yeah,
Whereas during our sessions, because we focus on what's been good, what's gone well, people start to see more and more of them in their life. They start to feel more
yeah,
positive, and it's like that catch 22, but in the way that we want it to be.
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of, I know you were saying about medication. So one of the things as well that a lot of doctors don't actually teach is when we take things like antidepressants, actually, if you imagine this is your neural pathways and you're taking antidepressants, unless those neural pathways are actually connecting and meeting, that antidepressant isn't necessarily doing very much. So the other thing that I always teach my customers is the 3 Ps. So positive action, so exercise especially, we know that it creates good chemicals. We know that it gets the neural pathways really moving around the brain.
Yeah.
Positive interaction, so spending time with people that we enjoy spending time with. If I was to sit here with you right now, Emily, and I was to just keep on smiling,
Yeah.
regardless of whether you smiled back at me or not, your brain would be mirroring me to some degree, using the chemicals that you would use to smile. And that's the same when we spend time with people that aren't in such a good place as well, then it can bring us down. And even things like if you were to have an EEG on your head right now, and I was to start talking about, oh my gosh, my left knee has been absolutely killing me all day, is so sore, so painful, your brain neurons would be lighting up where your knee was.
Wow.
So we have these mirror neurons that we're feeding off of each other all the time. So spending time with people that we enjoy spending time with is the positive interaction. And then the third one is positive thoughts. So even just every single day when you wake up, thinking about one good thing that happened yesterday, or when you go to bed, 3 good things that happened during your day, they all start to move towards that positive thoughts process.
Yeah, that's right. And journaling and things like that are really useful for writing it down, because I find when you write it down, it's much more powerful than just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, having that kind of deep reflection of your day, because sometimes you can just think, if one negative thing's happened in your day, it kind of overshadows the rest of the day. Kids are kind of a bit like that, aren't they? One little thing and the whole thing's like a disaster, isn't it? But actually, when you can unpick the day and kind of pick out actually some of the things that you've done really well in that day, or even just kind of getting through that negative part. I always say to people, how did you deal? Yeah, what did you learn from it? How did you deal with it? Did you deal with it better? That's a thumbs up from me. And should be for yourself as well. And yeah, I really like those 3 Ps, because I think it's easy for you to remember, and also it's good for you to sort of like check in with yourself when maybe you're not doing that and you think, oh, actually I am thinking a bit more negatively, and actually your experiences in life will be far more positive if you do that, rather than, like you say, when you walk into that cafe, all you see is bad or negativity, or the queue's long, or no one's doing anything. Your experience isn't going to be as good as the person who's gone, oh, I just can't wait to have a scone today. And like chat to, have a chat with someone. And and I love going into M&S and chatting to strangers. I've got a little girl now and she's a great conversation starter, and I always walk out of there feeling really lovely, having really nice interactions with people. And yeah, I really like that. So so that's kind of one of the techniques that you use. Are there any techniques that individuals can use, that like kind of more like self-hypnosis, I suppose, rather than doing that? Obviously going into deep relaxation with you is amazing, but you still want those tools to be able to go out in the real world, away from your session. So do you have anything that's kind of really useful for your clients that you find?
I've got a few things that are really useful. So my first tip is, I'm trying to find something I could use now, to get anything that you could throw from one hand to another. I'm not going to throw this because it's going to make noise, but you get an orange, a ball, anything, and you throw it from one hand to the other and you watch it.
Okay.
And this is called bilateral stimulation. So in short, it stimulates both parts of the brain. And it just helps to reduce that anxiety. It brings like a sense of calm. And then another tip is, it sounds really silly, and you won't feel like doing this. I always say this, you won't feel like doing this. You have to force yourself to do this. If you're having spiraling thoughts, say you're sat down, if you jump up and you shout stop and you clap, and then you do the silliest dance that you can possibly think of. Again, it sounds silly, but quite often people will be going from having awful spiraling thoughts to suddenly laughing.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's one of those things that is just absolutely worth trying.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit like this distraction really helps to calm, yeah, that monkey brain from getting too, you know, like you can imagine it, can't you, just like climbing all over the ceilings, and you turn around and go stop. It's like, oh, okay.
And it is quite often in, you know, in nurseries when kids are running around everywhere, you know, people suddenly clap and everybody goes, because it's that sudden kind of shock, and it's like shocking our own brain. And then finally, a tool which is really, really useful is called, well, you open up the peripheral vision. So you can do this where you are right now. So find, I don't know how close you are to a wall, but you want to be kind of sat a little bit back, and you want to find a spot which is slightly above eye level in front of you. You want to really, really focus just on that spot. And then what you want to do is start to keep your eyes focused on that spot, your head still. You want to start relaxing your vision. So you should then start to see more of the ceiling, more of the floor. Start to notice everything that you can possibly notice around you now. You want to relax that vision almost as much as if you held your hands out each side of your ears, that you'd be able to see them.
Yeah.
And you'll just notice kind of a state of calmness come over you. And that's kind of, we call it opening the trap door to the unconscious part of the brain. So it's allowing your brain to, you know, we're so busy so often asking questions, really trying to solve things. But it's actually, like you say, that whole, when you go to bed at night and you switch off and you suddenly go, oh my God, I just thought of that person's name.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we get into peripheral vision. It opens up that unconscious, and it just gives our unconscious chance to answer the questions that we've been asking the whole time, and brings us again into a state of calm. Really, really great for anybody who's got kids that might be going into exams, because it will also open up that, you know, trapdoor to the unconscious where all of their answers are stored.
Yeah. I'm definitely one of those people that I always remember stuff as soon as I hit, like my head hits the pillow. And I do find it really good just to write that stuff down. And because else I then sit there feeling anxious about forgetting it for the following day. So rather than thinking, oh God, I've completely forgot to do that today, and then worrying about the ramifications of that, is actually go, well, if I write it down, I won't forget by tomorrow, and I can deal with it tomorrow. And then I get like a good night's sleep, because that's also important for, you know, helping you to deal with the following day. If you're not sleeping well, then your anxiety is going to be much, much higher. And so, yeah, no, that's really cool.
And I've got a hypnotherapy recording, Emily, which I'm happy to send out to anybody. Don't have to be working with me. I quite often share it with people that might be struggling to sleep, or, you know, and the thing is, they always then are like, oh my God, I slept so much better, so I recommend you do to my friend. So I'm more than happy to give that out for free to anybody.
Amazing. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Thank you. And then your other hat that you have is kind of like more mindsets and manifestation coaching. And what role does that have in kind of overcoming anxiety? And is it kind of integrated into your kind of hypnotherapy process, or?
Yes, so I have a slightly different way of working when I do manifestation coaching. But there's similarities, because actually, again, I'd never kind of advise somebody to go into trying to manifest specific stuff whilst they're in a state of anxiety anyway, because we're just going to get things that make us feel more anxious in that state. So we want to get to kind of a calmer state, and I take people through a process. So one of the things I've actually trained in recently, which has been amazing, either for anxiety or for manifestation coaching, is timeline therapy. And what that essentially does is all of these things that we've been through in our lives, our brain always refers back to, say, for example, we get a feeling of being angry. Our brain will be actually referring back to the very, very first time that we experienced anger. And all of these emotions, so we release anger, we release sadness, we release guilt, we release fear, which is great for people that have got any phobias or fear that something bad's going to happen. And the very last one we release might be hurt. But none of those emotions are useful to us at all. So that timeline therapy takes us through the process of taking away the learnings, exactly like you were saying earlier, figuring out what we've learned from those things, but actually releasing the emotions. And I always say to people, it's a bit like if you were to build a house. When we're doing manifestation coaching, if you've got a house which is falling apart, but you're trying to build a loft conversion, it's not going to last. So, we want to start off by setting really, really secure, firm foundations first and foremost, and then we build upon those. And we get, the mindset where we feel kind of limitless, like we can manifest or do anything. And then actually, when you realize that circumstances aren't triggering you anymore, you find this state of peacefulness.
And when you say like releasing those emotions, because like those emotions you've just like listed off are kind of in our early childhood are a lot of the ones that we are kind of taught to suppress. So you're not allowed to be angry, you're not allowed to be hurt. If someone's taking your toy away from you and you were, and you're taught to share and give up your needs over being kind and thoughtful and being a nice person, being good, all of those things that you were, we really like probably express a lot of those emotions, but then we're told off often, for showing being, emotional or angry or being hurt for something, and then being called sensitive. And so when you're saying like releasing that, is there like you're processing it, so not avoiding that emotion but processing it? Or
so timeline therapy is a bit tricky to explain, but I basically take you back through your timeline to the event where we first had that incident or memory, but we do it in a very, very safe way, so you're never experiencing those emotions. Sometimes people have a release, they cry or release stuff during those, but they're not actually feeling into the emotions. And during revisiting it, I am talking to your unconscious part of the brain, and you start to find out what you learned from those events. And often actually people see a completely different perspective to it during those moments. And we take all of the learnings that we need so that the learnings can be kept, but the emotions can be released.
No, that's nice. And that learnings is kind of the evidence that you need to tell your brain that you are capable,
and safe,
a good person.
And a lot of people
they
don't have that, that feeling of safety and security. It's like it is our foundation. And if this is again with manifestation coaching, when people are, say for example, they want to manifest £1 million, but £1 million logically feels ridiculous, like so far away, it actually feels unsafe, which is why if you look at lottery winners, like I think it's something like 95% of lottery winners end up in exactly the same position as they were before they won the lottery, because they've suddenly got the money that they think they've always wanted, but their mindset hasn't learned to feel safe with it, so they splurge it, and they don't know how to actually look after that money.
No, that makes sense. My last question actually was just around skepticism around like hypnotherapy, because at the beginning you kind of said about people's, I suppose, misconceptions around hypnotherapy being that you being taken over by the hypnotherapist and talking like a cat, or is there anything that you would say to those naysayers?
I would say that we're being hypnotized all the time by your friends, by the radio, by the TV. If you think about any advert that's playing on the TV, it's trying to get into your emotions. So we don't usually buy anything unless we're emotionally kind of invested in it. And B, it's getting into your unconscious, it's drip feeding you. So we are being hypnotized all the time, but often in a way that we don't want to be hypnotized. I can't actually hypnotize anybody into doing anything they don't want to do. There is a human as has morals, and I can't overstep those morals. It's just, our conscious brain would wake up and say, no, that's not true, which is why everything we say is very positive. And actually, I use a lot of my customers' language during hypnotherapy session, because I want it, I can say to you, oh my gosh, Emily, you're the most beautiful person on earth. But if that makes you feel uncomfortable, actually I want to be using your language as much as possible so that you feel comfortable and it sinks in even more. And we can also, like you said before, hypnotize ourselves, like start just telling ourselves nice things.
Yeah, that's very true. I've done a lot of like self-love this year, and it does feel really icky to start with. But like you say, you build those neural pathways, and actually it begins to feel a bit softer and a bit nicer, and actually you start to believe it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely encourage anyone to really try that. But like you say, that kind of negative hypnosis within life, supermarkets do it all the time, they're always putting stuff in your kind of periphery in terms of influencing your decisions when you're buying food in the supermarket. So, and so we wonder why there is a lot of like health inequalities, because people do end up making choices, not necessarily that are beneficial to their health. So yeah, I think that was really useful way to put it.
And we go into trance, hypnotherapy trance all the time. Again, like if you were to drive somewhere, when you get there and you're like, how did I get here? You've just done it. It's been very automatic. Again, that's a state of hypnotherapy trance, essentially. You've gone into this deep state of just doing. And so, yeah, again, and some people hear absolutely everything I say. Some people hear nothing I say. So, if it was to be doing making people into chickens and stuff, for me that would be completely pointless.
Obviously, it's not for entertainment purposes, is it?
Exactly.
No, cool. Lovely, thank you so much. It's helped me a lot as well in terms of understanding what you do. I understood anyway, but it's really nice to chat and dig a little bit deeper. But I'd like to know, just to end on, I didn't tell you this question before this session, but I thought it'd be nice to ask our contributors to the platform. But if you could have dinner with any 3 people, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So it'd have to be David Attenborough, just because I love David Attenborough. I just think he's amazing. Who else would I have there? Neville Goddard, who's like my manifestation guru. I read all of his books.
Okay, someone you can relate to and just have verbal diarrhea with.
Yes, exactly. Oh, who else though? Emily.
It's okay to fill on the spot.
Tapping into my unconscious.
It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Oh, it'll probably be Dawn French, just for laughs.
Oh, yeah, just for a bit of. I love those 3. Yeah, they're definitely. I don't know the second person, but the other 2, I'm definitely. Yeah, they would be in my top contenders.
It would definitely make for an interesting dinner party.
Yeah, definitely. And then, just to finally finish, where can people go to find out more about you and your work?
So on Facebook, I am on there as Caroline Smith-Mclean, hypnotherapist and mindset coach. I can send you the link, because I put a lot of content out, which is, helping you to understand all of these things, all of these patterns that we've created throughout life, and how we can start to undo it, really. And sometimes I even put out mini meditations and things like that so people can watch.
Yeah, you're like my social media like who I aspire to be. Like you're amazing what you put out.
Thanks,
So
Emily.
good. So that's Facebook, and then are you on Instagram as well?
Yes, I am. So I'm CSM Hypnotherapy on Instagram.
Lovely, amazing. And so for anyone watching, the platform is going to be sort of developing over the next few weeks. Caroline will have her own profile page on there with all of those links, so that we've got easy access to that, and then I can pop the very kind recording that you are going to give to the members onto the platform and next to this recording, so it's easy to find, and they can do it straight away after they watch this recording.
Yeah, brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's it. Thank you. I'll see you later.
Emily. All right, thank you. Bye.